and I will introduce our second featured reader, Alyson Hallett, who was born in Somerset to a working class family. She refused at the age of 17 to apply to Oxford or Cambridge because it was elitist, and she chose the University of East Anglia, where she studied comparative literature. Her love of world literature, translation, and diverse cultural traditions has never diminished. Alyson has published more than 18 books of poetry, prose, and collaborative work with scientists, visual artists, and poets. She has written for Radio 3 and 4, won first prize in the Scintilla Long Poem Competition, and established her own writing school during the pandemic, the Guerrilla College of the Free Arts. Alyson is a Hawthornden Fellow, has taught at Arvon and Moniac Mor, and worked for the Royal Literary Fund for 9 years. For the past 20 years, she has curated the international poetry and public art project, The Migration Habits of Stones, and cited stones with words carved into them around the world. Alyson is currently working on a project to decolonize a university rock collection and translating a novel from French to English with Fiona Hamilton. She's also finishing a new book of poems and working on a fascinarium about meteorites and their impact. And Alyson, you of course know a little bit what's coming, and here's my reflection on your work. Like with Norse mythology, things are born from cold and ice in these poems, where glaciers carry eggs and artists give rise to creation from an intense interbeing with the ice. And like Norse mythology, this is a poetry where opposites melt into each other. In a way, all these glaciers have an inner fire, and things we see as static have hidden dynamics, have space, have a voice. The feral world of nature can be tamed or chaperoned, as it says in one poem, into submission for our cultural use. And then what we create in our cultured way of being can only exist because of and within the ferality of nature. There's a deep attraction and being at once here between individual and glacier through the medium of art, with an almost mystical, somewhat erotic quality. And again, that wholeness cannot exist without the brokenness. As if fracture isn't less whole, it says in the poem Glacier Study 1949. The part makes the whole, and all these poems form reverberating parts of a shiny world of ice and fire. Um, and Alyson, of course, for you as well, that terribly difficult question, how can poetry change the world?
Thank you so much for that amazing introduction. Thank you for inviting me to be here. Thank you, Isabel, for those stunning poems. And my answers to your questions, I think for me, poetry is essentially about transformation and metaphors at its heart. And, you know, I've written a lot of poems for friends and family for their weddings and funerals. And I think that always kind of reflects that moment of transformation, because as far as I know, people don't get married and read a chapter of a novel. You know, it's a poem, it's that distillation, it's that moving from one place to another. And when I was thinking about this, I was thinking as well about how we change the world of poetry. And particularly over the last 5, maybe a few more years, it's been shaken up for the better. So we've had to give more attention to ethics, to diversity, to equality of opportunity, and to ask who are the gatekeepers. So I'm really interested in how we change the world of poetry and how that ripples out, but how the world ripples into that as well, because it was a very undiverse place. And many people were excluded. So I'm interested in the actual world of poetry. And then I was thinking as well that, you know, I mean, poetry saves my life, basically. It changes my world, but I feel as well that it's part of a community of change, you know, along with music and art and friendship. and, you know, the world, you know, the trees, the rocks, you know, it's part of that community of change rather than, you know, that kind of isolated, kind of heavy responsibility for poetry to be changing the world. It's just one thing among many others that are making changes, I think. Anyway,
Wow.
good luck with your essay. I'd
Well,
be
I'm
really
now
interested to read it.
I'm now thinking I have to rewrite it. No, I'm so happy I'm asking this question. But in the essay I mentioned asking questions to poets and that no one ever said, well, poetry started a revolution or stopped the war. And here I'm asking this question, and both you and Isabel give answers to how, how poetry essentially saved lives. So I need to rewrite my essay.
Well, no, I mean, I think it does start revolutions as well. I mean, it's the poets they lock up.
Right.
On the
Yeah.
whole, it's, you know, are we quarrying for some kinds of truths that may not want to be heard or seen? Yeah,
Yeah.
they lock us up around the world. And yeah.
Yeah. So thank you. It's putting my brain in a new gear. And while I do that, I invite you to take us into your work.
Okay, thank you so much. So tonight I'm going to be reading from my pamphlet, End of the Glacier. And we're going to start with a film of one of these poems. So I was invited by the Wilhelmina Barnes Graham Trust to respond to the glacier paintings of Wilhelmina Barnes Graham. And this film was made by Tilly Hayden, who works for the Wilhelmina Barnes Graham Trust. And I just wanted to say briefly that this will give you a glimpse of some of her paintings and also some of the materials from the archive, the Wilhelmina Barnes Graham archive. And maybe that's all I'll say for now. Maybe show the film. And if you want to turn up the volume on your computer, because it seems to be quite quiet coming over the screen. But maybe if we play it now, Mila, that would be great.
Glacier Nocturne. She came out here at night, onto the ice. Grey, iridescent lines, all angles at once, as the dark sky hinged to the half-lit land. Where did the light come from? Did it emanate from the glacier, some hidden life within? She came out here at night, onto the ice, or was that into the ice? The reel of water caught mid-motion, swirling and still, as the dark sky hinged to the tilting land. Her hand surrendered to every curve. Somewhere an egg, an eye, a wandering line. She came out here at night, onto the ice, and drew prisms from the crystal below. It was freezing, dreamy, lonely beneath dark skies hinged to the frantic, half-lit land. Ghost caverns, voids, loops and lunges sprang out of the ice as if the ice was alive. She came out here at night, onto the ice, drew a strip of the willow, and changed her life.
Thank you, Mila. Thank you for showing that. I think one of the things that has come up for me a lot working with her glacier paintings is a sense of musicality and movement in them. And Wilhelmina Barnes Graham, she had synesthesia, so her senses were kind of traveling in many different directions at once, but it was persistent for me looking at these paintings and drawings, this sense of music and movement. So The first poem I'm going to read for you is called Choreographies. And in this, I'm interested in the expression of a woman's power. So Wilhelmina Barnes Graham wasn't that known in her lifetime. And she died in 2004. And since then, there's been a lot of work to bring her painting much more to the attention of the public. And in a way, at the moment, she's having her moment. There's an amazing film out by Mark Cousins that's been touring cinemas at the moment. It's a 1.5 hour documentary about her work, and it's a stunning film. And there've been various exhibitions of her work. So finally, she's becoming more known. We know there's been a lot of women artists buried. It's a kind of ongoing archaeological project. So I was keen in this as well to reference a little bit my Lord, Audre Lorde, and her great essay on the uses of the erotic, because it's such a source of power. This is Choreographies. There's space inside the ice, shifting space, space that transforms, cracks, glitches, and glistens. If you listen, you'll hear its blue voice speaking. Tense and taut, transparent and strong, a glacier stretches its tongue across the earth. Close up and intimate, it invites you to plunge into its choreography of networks, unstable compounds, rubble, fissures. An artist's confidence stretches from the tree that makes the air she breathes to her hand. Breathing is key. The glacier breathes. The artist breathes. Both are vast, erotic, brilliant. It's caused some consternation. I've had glaciologists and various people saying to me, but how can a glacier be erotic? I thought, well, how can it not be? Have you looked at one? You know, have you kind of stood on one? That, you know, the shapes in them are quite astonishing. So next, I'll talk a little bit about the egg, Mila, that you mentioned. That there's when you look at the paintings, and there's a lot of paintings of the glacier. Wilhelmina Barnes Graham went to this glacier for a week on holiday. It's the Grindelwald Glacier in Switzerland. And she was only there for a week. And she drew when she was there, but she then created so many paintings when she came back. And even 40 years after that week there, she was still returning to this moment of painting glaciers. And as far as I can see, something quite astonishing happened for her on the glacier. And I don't know if you've experienced this in your own life, a moment when something will help you to drop into a way of expressing or being something that feels more you than anything that's come before. So some of her paintings before this time were much more derivative. But from this moment on the glacier, something different happens for Wilhelmina Barnes Graham, and she doesn't look back. And I mean, I don't know if you know her work, you can see a lot of images online, a lot of her paintings online, and she's daring. She's bold, she's daring, and in her 90s, she's painting on canvases that are maybe 4 or 5 meters wide. So this is coming back to the egg. Feral the glacier is. Feral the glacier is, not like tamed ice, chaperoned into ice cubes or channeled into cryogenic canisters. Marching, scything, rebel thing, geometric and electric. Air so dry, so clean, so blue, it invades your brain and starts to rave. This is not romantic. This is romance on a mountainous scale. Feral, the glacier is. Feral too, its frozen egg. If you hatch on the ice, nothing can stop you. And nothing, I don't think anything did ever stop her after that. So a lot of these have got titles that I've taken from paintings. And this next one is Glacier Study 1949. And this is more of a kaleidoscope of images. And I was going to read you a little quote from a book about contemporary woman artists, where somebody says that when painting with nature, it's not about the representation of appearances, but the allowing of natural forces from within oneself to work in accord with the outside world. So allowing those natural forces from within to work in accord with the outside world. So it's about that kind of congruence and that meeting of different worlds. And it's this is more of an unstable poem. Maybe the Grindelwald Glacier has receded by over 1 kilometer since she was there painting it. So what she was painting is no longer there. So I wanted some of that instability to come through in the work a bit. Glacier Study 1949. As if a city tumbles inward, as if a body breathes into the wilderness, as if a spanner suddenly appears, as if build and unbuild unite, as if skies inside night, the way blues inside ice, as if fracture isn't less whole, as if tentative everywhere and everything, as if see-through sees into you, as if last summer's sails echo in the glacier's fold, as if a line can carry 1,000 tons, as if ochre, as if black, as if tiny cracks pivot horizons from horizontal to vertical to diagonal, as if the universe is trying to speak to you. And my final poem, Upper Glacier Theme. So these poems were written in quite a rush, most of them. I went to an amazing exhibition at the Hatton Gallery in Newcastle, and it had those lovely little seats that you can sit on, you know, those little portable seats. They look a bit like fishing stools or something. Anyway, I went from painting to painting in a bit of a kind of drunken stupor, really, because it was very different for me to see them in person rather than online or on postcards or in books. And I was interested in that space that was opening between me and the image, but it was more of a triangulated relationship, I guess, as well with Wilhelmina Barnes Graham's ghost. So I'm quite interested in that whole mix that comes into play between me as the writer and the painting that I'm maybe responding to. So it mentions Somerset in this poem. I live in Somerset, which is where I am this evening. I'm in a small village called Southstoke, just outside of Bath, and Somerset's where I grew up. So this is Upper Glacier Theme. This is my final poem, and thank you so much for your attention this evening. I wanted to enter the painting. I wanted me and the painting to melt into each other. I wanted to run my hand along the edge of the glacier. I wanted to understand the relationship between the white and the red. I wanted to be frozen and hot. I wanted to enter the vortex of plains. I wanted to give myself to the cornucopia of angles. I turned on the tap and water came out. Where had that water been? A glacier thawed, rose into a cloud, migrated, dropped into a reservoir, and poured into my pot of tea. I drank the tea, absorbed the ice, walked into the winter orchards of Somerset with a quarter pint of glacier inside. I wanted to enter the painting. Yes, I wanted that. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was amazing. And that puts glaciers in a whole new perspective for me. I've never seen one though, so now I really want to see one.